Do you know that New York City at one point in time had the largest black population of any English colony? And in 1741, before there was an American Revolution, there was an African named Kwaku who goes into this building on March 18th and burns down the governor's mansion. The backstory to revolution in New York involves lots of enslaved Africans, which did not support the dominant narrative of what America's foundings looked like. Black revolutionaries are not supposed to be considered patriots. One of the things that also is intriguing about this particular story I'm telling you is that it was primarily involved enslaved African people, but Sarah Houston was Irish. Her and her husband were good friends with Caesar, Kofi, and Prince that were African. And ask yourself, why would an Irish person be interested in siding with African enslaved people against the British in the 1740s? They were both oppressed, exactly.
So Kamal, welcome. When you're giving your tours, and even though the buildings aren't there anymore, you can still get a sense to the intimacy of this small town at the tip of Manhattan and how 2,200 enslaved individuals have opportunities to meet away from the eyes of their owners. It's completely illegal for these enslaved individuals to be meeting together, to be drinking together at a tavern, to have these kinds of conversations going on. We're going to be talking about the events that took place in New York City in the spring and summer of 1741. It's been called the 1741 conspiracy, the New York plot, the Great Negro plot.
It was a conspiracy, it was a plot, but once you begin burning down property in an act to rebel, then you now have a rebellion. Reason for obscuring this particular rebellion is it began to show how class differences could begin to be massaged out, and people began to feel like they were a unified working class.
That's always been a concern of the white elite protecting their status through tactics of divide and conquer for the working classes, dividing against gender or religion or race, and the elite can maintain themselves in control.
Yeah, pretty much. Do you find that this is an incident in history that is hard to prove based upon the fact that Daniel Horstmann was the Supreme Court justice, also record keeper, also interrogator, prosecutor?
Any form of truth to this story is problematic. This is Daniel Horstmann summing up the trial of Kwaku and Kofi. The prisoners were asked what they had to offer in arrest of judgment, and they offering nothing but repetitions and protestations of their innocence. But Horstmann wouldn't put it down. He would not allow these enslaved individuals of African descent to have their words in his book.
People also say, oh yeah, we'll never know what these people thought, these enslaved Africans, because they couldn't write anything down, right? They don't have any books, there's no records, right? So we don't know. Yeah. Then what you created is a dynamic in perpetuity where you'll always privilege the slave masters because they had printing presses. But people take actions that are statements. April 6, 1712, there's 29 people, according to the mayor, Robert Hunter, that set fire to Broadway and Maiden Lane. And so for there to be 4 fires on April 6, 1741, where Kofi's caught, is that chance that somehow April 6 is the same date that fires are being set those many years apart? I think it's unlikely that that's chance when people, had oral traditions of passing history on. This is a way of looking at the written record of enslaved people, is to look at their actions and give them their just due and understand it for what it was. It's commentary, it's political action. It was considered criminal, but what does it mean to be a criminal if your body was stolen? Mm-hmm. How is Caesar, Kofi, and Prince analyzing the rules of New York City when it's illegal for them to, push for freedom? And the people who resisted enslavement were the people who laid the blueprint and laid the foundation for a guerrilla-style war against the British Empire that created our American Revolution. And by obscuring things like this rebellion in 1741, not having anything in a public square to acknowledge the 1712 rebellion, you begin to take all the black people out of this evolution of revolution in the 18th century that culminates in not only the American Revolution, but also the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution. And this is something that is historic racism. And there's a way for us to like look at the facts and recognize what's problematic, but still be intelligent enough to say, wait a minute, this is a pattern.